Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison.
Hello, everyone. It is just coming up on 9 o'clock, just shy of it, about 5 minutes to 9 on the 5th of March, 2025. A lot of things going on. But first, I want to go and wish my fellow Christian brothers and sisters a very happy Lent. Of course, for those of you who probably were celebrating, last night was Mardi Gras. So officially, that it ends the rather bacchanal celebrations, traditionally celebrated in New Orleans, but also in places like Mobile, Alabama, among other places. And now we enter into 40 days of Lent. Now, for those of you who are not aware of what Lent is supposed to be, maybe you've heard about it because you're not Christian, let me briefly explain. So, Lent is a 40-day observation that Christians observe that, in a very real sense, re-dramatizes Christ going into the desert for 40 days. Now, if you remember, if you have any knowledge of Scripture, you notice that Jesus was baptized. He was baptized by his cousin, John the Baptist. And after that, it is said that he went into the desert to pray. And in doing so, now, for purposes of counting, we do not count within the 40 days Sundays. So, because typically as we go to Holy Mass, there are occasionally feast days that are celebrated. So Sunday does not count. So now it doesn't mean that means we take a vacation from Lent. Not really, but it's not counted within the 40 days. Now, sometimes the early Christian tradition had it at only just 40 hours to Easter, which would encompass going into Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and then Easter Sunday. But the church, in its wisdom, extended it to 40 days. Now, traditionally, what does this mean? Well, Ash Wednesday and Good Friday are within the Catholic tradition the only two times that we fast. That is, we abstain from food, and by doing so, we have a very small portion. Partly is to unite the suffering of people around the world that go hungry that day, and it is unusual that people would go and whatever they would spend for groceries on these particular days, they would go and give it to the poor as a sign of their solidarity with them. But for the most part, you are asked to give up something. Now, the whole point is it should be significant enough that it makes an impact in your life. Some people go and say, "Oh well, I'm just gonna give up chocolate," and as I had a very good priest friend of mine who went and said in a homily one time, he said, "Listen, if causing you to give up chocolate causes you to become a raging witch, don't give up the chocolate. Give up something else." Because we can't bear to deal with you when you're in that other state. That was a very unique observation. So today, many of us, I have not had a chance to go, but tonight, I'll probably go tonight, get services where you see us getting ashes on our forehead with the sign of the cross. And you'll hear two things, either this saying, remember, dust, thou art dust, and dust you shall return, or repent and believe in the gospel. Either one of those two. But the ashes are made from the palms that we waved last year during Holy Week. Those palms are burned, created into ashes, and then that's what we use to mark the sign of the cross on our foreheads. So, for those of you who are not Christian, maybe you might want to entertain. We have a lot of people that are coming into the church, and they come into the church on the Easter Vigil, which will be approximately in a month and a half. And that's a very beautiful, beautiful ceremony. See people coming in. Either people are fully baptized, which means they've never been baptized, or people are coming in from other faiths, such Protestant faiths, etc., where they're not rebaptized, but they do have to make a profession of faith. And either way, it's a very beautiful and moving ceremony. Okay, so enough about Lent. So what I wanted to talk about today was what happened really last night. The President of the United States came to Capitol Hill, and he came to address what is known as a joint session of Congress. Now, what makes this different is that the address itself is not, because in other instances, like for example, next year, when President Trump does come back onto Capitol Hill, it will be considered not a joint session of Congress, but it will be the State of the Union. It will be his official constitutional responsibility for him to comment to the Congress and inevitably the nation on what the State of the Union is as he sees it. Now, we've seen instances where the State of the Union was very good. We've also seen instances where the State of the Union was not so good. In this case, it was rather unique in the sense that the last time when Trump came to the rostrum, it was Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House, obviously, and I forget offhand who was the president or the vice president was Mike Pence. How could I forget? The vice president is the president of the Senate. And that, if you remember, was the last one where Nancy Pelosi did her infamous clapping episode, and then at the end of the speech actually tore up the speaker's copy of the State of the Union. Like she was just so fed up and to do that. And now, in this case, Pelosi is not the Speaker of the House anymore. Thank God. And thank God that she's not even in leadership anymore. But there were some shots with her sitting as a backbencher, as it were, with her little sign, getting ready. And I think that's where we really have gotten to the point in this great divide, is that, there used to be a saying that with respect to foreign policy, all divisions ended at the shore of the nation. And what it meant by that is that whatever differences we had going forward, they were melted away when it came into the defense of this great nation. Unfortunately, we do not see that anymore. We're seeing the divide is getting ever deeper. Some members of Congress decided not to show up. Other members did show up and then caused a ruckus, as we saw with Al Green. And I believe Al Green is from Texas, where he was mumbling something, and at first the speaker hit the gavel to remind the general audience that, this was the President of the United States. He would not be silenced. And then finally, he was ordered out of the chamber and escorted by the Sergeant of Arms. I remember about, 15 years ago when Joe Wilson had a similar episode where Barack Obama was giving his speech, and Nancy was definitely in the speaker's chair. I remember that. And Biden was sitting as the president of the Senate. And the comment was that President Obama made was that illegals will not get any sort of access to federal health care, because that was the big push to get health care done, the predecessor for Obamacare. Well, what happened was Joe Wilson from South Carolina, a Republican, stood up and said, "You lie." And he didn't do it once, he did it twice. Now, previous congressional protocol would have indicated one of two things: that he would have been censured by the entire House, which means that he would have had been censured by 2/3 of the House. Well, considering that one half was Republican, they weren't going to censure him, and they didn't. Matter of fact, Joe Wilson, in that one night or that 24-hour period, so the president was speaking at roughly 9 o'clock in the evening. So for 3 hours on that one day, and then for 21 hours the next, he raised over $2 million in his reelection bid. Okay, that's how caustic the attitude was back there. And of course, Pelosi tried to do a censure, and it wouldn't go anywhere. He was not censured. Well, Al Green was forcibly removed out of the House chamber. I mean, he was physically escorted. Now, the one thing the speaker did not do, and you can't see in this photo, is there is a thing called the mace of the house, and that is a eagle with a full wingspan outward, okay, that is mounted on a wooden staff that's approximately about 4 feet tall. And the tradition is that if the house gets so unruly, the sergeant at arms will go and take the speaker upon direction of the speaker will take the speaker will notify to the sergeant of arms. The sergeant of arms will then take the mace off of its pedal and display it in the house. He'll actually walk in front of the rostrum and display it, like to signify to the whole house, listen, it's time to get back in order. He did not have to display the mace, but it was just almost to the point of ridicule that, of course, on the bullet points that traditionally would have gotten, even to the point where President Trump was introducing various guests. Now, this is something that's relatively new. That was something done, and I believe it was President Reagan that did this. As an aside to talking about how great the Union was, he had a great love for the American people, and he would bring in various guests to do that. And it's been done on both sides of the aisle. And I think it's a rather poignant part of the speech. It brings the speech home to the sense that we're not just quote unquote talking about politics. We're talking about average Americans that are somehow making a difference in their community. Well, the big push last night was the elimination of men getting out of women's sports. Now, the president spoke about the fact that he has gone and signed an executive order. I think it needs to be legislation. But the whole point is that these are the sorts of things. Now, again, this is something that I I don't get. I don't know. Is it because I'm a man? Is it because I don't have ovaries? I don't get it. But as a father of a daughter that played sports when she was in high school, I would have been beside myself if somehow a biological male was allowed in the same locker room as my daughter. I'm sorry. It's like, this is not going to fly. And yet, time and time again, the Democrats are pissed off about a lot of things, okay? Let's face it. Number one, they're they're totally off the rails when it comes to Elon because Elon is doing something that Republicans has really wanted to do, and they want to audit the checkbook. It's like, as a husband and wife, if you have a checkbook, okay, you have a single checkbook that all of your bills are paid out of your household, and yet somehow, and it doesn't. I don't mean the husband does not allow the wife, or the wife doesn't allow the husband. No one is allowed to audit the checkbook. Now, there's a good saying that I would teach when I was counseling young couples is that when it came to the checkbook, if they're going to have a single checkbook, okay, one person is the writer of the checks, but the other person is the auditor. And what I mean by that is to say, let's say, because in most instances, the wives write the majority of the checks, right? Fine. Then the husband has the right to go through the checkbook and question how the money is being spent. Now, for years, and again, I don't want this to make sound like an endorsement, but it is a fact. I have used Quicken financial software since I was an MBA student back in 1991. I learned accounting, the basics of accounting in MBA school. I had a little bit of accounting understanding when I was at the Air Force Academy, but in terms of actually using how to track the transactions and that sort of thing, I had to go to MBA school to learn accounting. However, once I did do that, it was amazing how simple my marriage became because I'm not one to deny my wife a lot of things. You know, I have a pretty laissez-faire relationship with my wife. If she says that she needs something, okay, fine, just give me the receipt just so that I can record it. But And then as banking improved and, we were able to get, your statement, traditionally you had to wait once a month to balance your checkbook, and then it got to, where you could go and balance, and I still to this day, I balance my checkbook every single day. But I can tell you down to the penny how much I spend on groceries, on utilities. I mean, you name it. I can tell you down to the penny. Down to the penny. So my whole point is that it is not unreasonable for the executive to want to see how the legislative is spending the money because, again, the power of the purse rests within the House of the Representative. However, any funding bill has to be confirmed by the Senate before it goes to the president to be signed into law. However, and this is a part that a lot of people forget, including a lot of legislatures. The president, by virtue of his authority as being the chief magistrate of the United States, has the power to impound funds if they are not being spent to which the aim that was desired. Richard Nixon actually impounded funds to prove to Congress that he could do it as a way of trying to reel in their spending. And we have known consistently that the Democrats will continue to tax and spend. And what Elon is doing to the betterment of the nation is he's identifying so much waste. Because let's face it, folks, when we go and we put these expenditures into the common light of sunlight, I've said multiple times, and I will say it again, that disinfectant is the best form, or sunshine, excuse me, is the best form of disinfectant. Once things are out in the open for everyone to see, it never ceases to amaze me how these Democrats are willing to go and to, the expression is die on this hill of mediocrity, of really to the point of insanity, of some of the stuff that they're trying to justify as being essential for the United States to spend. No. And even when they say, quote unquote, there may be, some waste, it's never given to the fact that it's their waste. It's always somebody else's. So it's that game where you get 10 people and you tell them with their left hand to point to the right, or the left hand to point to the left to the person next to them. And then the person goes, well, guess what? When it comes around, the person that's to the right of you is pointing with their left finger to you, right? So, not my waste, but it's your waste. No, not my waste, it's your waste. Well, it's everybody's waste. And I think what Elon is doing is really for the fine. Now, needless to say, he's going to have a blast going into the Department of Defense. I can't wait for that to happen. I can't wait until he audits the Fed. That will be just amazing what will happen. But I think that this year, 2025, is going to be tumultuous in the sense one of two things is going to happen. Either there's going to be some cataclysmic event that is going to push not even the United States, but the entire world into a depression like we have never seen before, number one. But number two, or I think that we're going to have the great revealing, and we're finally going to be able to get our books in order and finally submit not only a balanced budget, number one, because we spend $2 trillion more, or think of it this way, we overspend every 90 days $500 billion. Every 90 days, like clockwork. We only pull in about $4.5 trillion in all sorts of income taxes and that sort of thing, and yet we spend close to $6.5 trillion, which means we have a $2 trillion. Well, that's not sustainable, and the fact of the matter is that something has got to give. So, I think it was not only incredible that the boss did that, but I think it was more importantly is that the Republican Party. I've never been proud of the Republican Party. I'm just going to say it. They are going and showing some real steel here, and they should. They should. I think that in light of overwhelming things are going to change, and I think they're going to change for the better. But unfortunately, we're going to have to. Democrats are going to get their feelings hurt. And oh, by the way, so be it. So that's all I really wanted to go and say about last night. I thought it was an excellent effort, and I hope to do it again. I wish that he'd come back on Capitol Hill in the fall, and kind of do another mini speech, kind of go and do that. I think that hearing from the president once every 6 months on Capitol Hill, I think it would do the nation a great deal of good, and I hope he does that. So the other thing I wanted to comment on real quick was the status of our FBI. Uh, it was amazing, but things finally are getting settled. The evidence that was being looked for is now being recovered, and evidently it was a lot of evidence. I think that Ms. Bondi has gone, or Attorney General Bondi, I don't want to say just Ms. Bondi, but Attorney General Bondi has really gone and understood clearly what she had to do, and she did do it. And as a result of that, the SAC, or the special agent in charge in New York, was forcibly retired. Um, and I think that was a good thing. I think the fact that he was going and being an obstructionist, he actually issued an email saying that he was prepared to dig in. Well, you know who else is prepared to dig in? A gravedigger is prepared to dig in. So the fact of the matter is that now he is out. I hope that the evidence, not too much evidence was destroyed. There was at least inklings of that evidence was possibly being destroyed, and in doing so, to do that. Um, I just want to go and see how much of that was actually done. And let's face it, the other thing that we need to do is to remember this. And let me go and get Ms. Bondi. Okay? Remember, folks, it's called obstruction of justice. Anyone that has gone in and obstructed with any sort of investigation that's authorized really by the President of the United States and with his concurrence and under the authority of the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI, if anyone has gone and obstructed with that, you're going to jail. I'm sorry, you're going to jail. As I said, the American people have had enough. This is just, what we have gone and constantly said, and now this is, in a very real sense, we are taking our government back. And it's important to do that because I think that for far too long, we have been out of control. That a small cabal of people have basically stated, no, I'm too important, and therefore, you go ahead and move on, and to that extent, or basically get out of the way. And I think that what we're seeing instead is now the people are revolting back through their government and saying, no, you work for us, not the other way around. And I hope this is really the start of the draining of the swamp. It could not come soon enough, and it can't come fast enough. But far more work needs to be done. And I hope that this administration is up for it. So, again, thanks so much for listening. Happy Lent. Make it a prayerful one. We go and we identify Lent by three different ways: by prayer, by almsgiving, and what we call acts of mercy. Okay, to be generous beyond what we would normally be, and it's not just money. Okay, to relate to our fellow human beings as human beings, and at the end of the day, we are all children of God. And I hope that as we approach, especially going into Holy Week and Easter, that sense of renewal washes over our injured land, because God only knows it needs it. And maybe, just maybe, we can start looking forward to a greater America, a more spiritual America, a more enlightened America, and dare I say, a holier America. So, again, folks, thank you for your time. We'll talk to you in a bit.